I'm very happy to be able to give this Dharma talk today, and especially looking out into the Hokyoji Zendo, of which I'm not in because I have a fever, a small little fever, of which doctors would not consider I have a fever because it's not that high, but it has to do, I'm sure it's not contagious. It has to do with some intestinal things that are going on. And unfortunately, I have not been able to participate in this work weekend, except watching from my room all of the work that's been going on, and which it seems to be extraordinary. So just my deep appreciation to all of you who are in the Zendo right now. And I'm so sorry I haven't been able to be more a part of your practice. I was able to get out and take a photo the other day of all of you in your your bright red, yellow vests, so doing work. So in any event, even though I'm 99.9%, I don't have a contagious thing, or it's not a respiratory thing. I think, well, if I'm febrile, then I probably should quarantine, given today's circumstances. Today, I'm going to talk about the Madhupindika Sutta from the Majjhima Nikayas. And do you want to translate that for us, Jushin?
I think it's a little further along in my studies than that. Yeah, there's a Sandi going on there. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, this is what I think. This is what the translate. I don't have any thought about this. I'm just going by what the translator said. It's the Honeyball Sutta. So, but I'll wait to the end to explain how that title came about. And there's a reason why I like to speak from the Nikayas as a Zen person, which is a little unusual. And that is because I deeply appreciate how language is taken to its extreme in an explanation that where there's no double talk. I think I'm just kind of figuring that out with last night and tonight. Why do I like these Nikayas? And it's not that I don't appreciate Zen. Of course, I appreciate Zen. But Zen has so much stuff that you say something and then you negate what you say, and then you say it again, then you negate that. And it kind of leaves us all confused sometimes. So I like Nikayas in that they just state it, and the language is so eloquent that it's just something I really appreciate. And what I find is that my study of Zen and the Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu combined makes a complementary picture of Buddhism, the understanding of Buddhism. If we just pick one avenue, then I think we're probably going to miss the panoramic picture. So here we go. The Honeyball Sutta. Thus have I heard on one occasion, the fortunate one was living in the Sakyan country at Kapilavatthu. So just to back up a bit, this is where Buddha was born. in our meal chants, we say Buddha was born in Kapilavatthu. Now that's the Sanskrit for Kapilavatthu, of which these sutras are written in, which is Pali. So he's in the place where he was born. A further former translation was Lumbini. That's what I grew up learning in Buddhism. However, Lumbini is a town that developed after Kapilavatthu. In other words, it's a more recent town. It's just the nearest town to where the Buddha was born. And the town of Kapilavatthu was destroyed. So that's why I learned Lumbini. But later translators changed it back to Kapilavatthu. So that's just information for you. He's in the area where he was born when this sutta takes place. And I think that makes a little bit, it's kind of nice information. It's like I'm in, if I were a great teacher, which I'm not saying I am, but it's like I was going for alms in Sioux City, Iowa. It's like, well, that would, okay, well, he's in Sioux City, Iowa, asking for alms. Interesting. So he's in, when he had wandered for alms in Kapilavatthu and had returned from his round, after his meal, he sat down in the great wood for the day's abiding. And entering the great wood, sat down at the root of a bilva sapling for the day's abiding. So that's what Buddha does in a general day. He just goes out, begs for food, and then he sits down for the day's abiding by a tree. So that's his day. It might be a little different from most of our days, but anyway, that was his day. Then Dandapanani, the Shakyan, now that's where Buddha was born. He was of the Shakyan clan. So this is a person of his clan. While walking and wandering for exercise. He's just wandering. He's not doing anything except just walking for exercise. Went to the great wood, and when he had entered the great wood, he went to the bilva sapling where the fortunate one was and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he stood at one side, leaning on his stick, and asked the fortunate one, "What does the recluse assert? What does he proclaim?" Now, the word dandapanani means stick in hand. And according to the commentaries, he was a young, able-bodied person, but he carried a golden stick. And he, in the commentary, says he ostentiously carried a golden stick, as if, look at me, I have my golden stick, I'm walking around. So when the commentary says, what does the recluse assert? What does he proclaim? The commentary says this is pretty aggressive. It's like he's not being very courteous. He's just saying, what do you do? What are you doing? It's like, I've got my golden stick here. Tell me what you're doing. However, it does say previously that this courteous and amiable talk, was finished. So they always say that in the sutta, no matter how dastardly the person is who's asking the question, it's always amiable and courteous talk. So just interesting to note. So the Sublime One responds, "Friend, I assert and proclaim such a teaching that one does not quarrel with anyone in this world, with its God, its demons, its Brahmas, in this generation, with its recluses and Brahmins, its princes and its people. Such a teaching that perceptions no more underlie that person who abides detached from sensual pleasures, without perplexity, shorn of worry, free from craving for any kind of being. I've talked on numerous occasions about this any kind of being, and technically in Buddhism, there's three kinds of being. It's craving, three kinds of craving. It's the craving for sensual pleasure, it's the craving for being, and the craving for non-being. I don't think I need to go into the craving about sensual pleasures. I think we all have a pretty good understanding of that. But the craving for being is, I can see it most clearly when I'm sitting in pretty concentrated zazen, in which I see an intense craving for being. Now, what I mean concentrated zazen is what I mean is that when I'm aware of almost every thought as it's coming up, and then I become aware that every thought that comes up is a craving for being. Because if you look at almost any thought that arises while we're sitting zazen, we can find that the subject of that thought is I. It's always I. And what that indicates to me is this just intense, I mean, it's intense craving for a being. Like, I am here. I am alive. I am sitting zazen, something like that. And that's very, very challenging to see in the first place, to be aware of, and then to let go of that craving. And then there's the craving for non-being, and that's just as complicated, because I believe the way I understand this is that having become so frustrated and tired of this constant arising of craving for being, I just want it to disappear. Please go away. And yet that craving for non-being is just the same as the craving for being. So the challenge is, how do we put away or just accept both? They're just happening, and not get tossed away by either one of them, those cravings. So when this statement was said by the fortunate one, Dandapani, the Shakyan, shook his head, wagged his tongue, raised his eyebrows until his forehead was puckered in 3 lines. Then he departed, leaning on his stick. Now, this happens a few times in the Nikayas, not very many, just a handful of times. But I appreciate this because I think we might have the idea that if you or if I were a Buddha, everyone would just revere us at every moment of our lifetime. They would just respectfully listen to everything we say with great attention. Well, apparently this wasn't true in the Buddha's life. People, wag their tongue, raise their eyebrows until the forehead was puckered in 3 lines. So let's just keep in mind that if people don't pay attention to us in the way that we would like them to, the Buddha dealt with this problem, this challenge, just as well, even when he was recognized as a Buddha. Then when it was evening, the fortunate one rose from his meditation and went to Nigroda's park, where he sat down on a seat and told the bhikkhus what had taken place. Then a certain bhikkhu asked, "Venerable sir, what is the teaching that the fortunate one asserts whereby one does not quarrel, etc.? What is that teaching?" And then the Buddha responds, "Bhikkhus, as to the source through which perceptions and notions tinged by mental proliferation beset a person, if nothing is found there to delight in, welcome, and to hold to, this is the end of the underlying tendency to lust, to the underlying tendency to aversion, of the underlying tendency to views, of the underlying tendency to doubt, of the underlying tendency to conceit, and the underlying tendency to the desire for being, of the underlying tendency to ignorance. This is the end of resorting to rods and weapons, of quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malice, and false speech. Here these unwholesome states cease without remainder." Now this, to me, is like so much why I appreciate the Nikayas, this kind of statement, this kind of passage. He says, this is the end of the underlying tendency. Don't you just really appreciate that? The underlying tendency. We can see it in ourselves, the underlying tendency to lust. And in lust, Buddhism just doesn't mean sexual lust. It means the lust for all sensual pleasures, better sounds, get a better stereo, get a better car, get a, better food, better restaurant, whatever. It's just the lust for sensual pleasures. And that's lust. Then the underlying tendency to aversion. So that's the opposite. And we hear this in Zen many times. It says, just avoid picking and choosing. Well, that means, and we also hear, don't turn away from stuff. So that's the aversion. I mean, this is exactly Zen Buddhism as far as I'm concerned. We crave, we go after some things, and then we avert other things. It's the underlying tendency to do this. When someone says something angry, we try to get away from it. I experience this all the time. I'm now the president of the SCBA, and the first week went really, really well. Nobody called me. No one sent me an email. I said, "Oh, this job is easy." Well, things have changed a bit, and I've had to have a couple of conversations that weren't quite as so easy. So it's like, it would be my tendency, I'll just send them an email and boom, 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 like 4 sentences. It'll take me like 10 minutes to write it, and it'll be done. However, there's been a few people who have admonished me, said, okay, when a difficult kind of situation arises, don't try to solve it by email. Just give the person a call and talk. And it's certainly not my tendency to do that. However, it really, really does seem to work out better, you know. I think under almost all circumstances, you just talk to the person. It's not easy. It takes more time. But so it's the underlying tendency to aversion, to avert from things that we perceive are going to be unpleasant. And the other thing is, just to emphasize once again, the craving to go after things that are pleasant, that we perceive to be pleasant. Just the underlying tendency to views, to have this, your opinions, strong opinions about this or that or the other thing. Underlying tendency to doubt. To ignorance. And putting those things aside, this is the end of resorting to rods and weapons, quarrels, brawls, disputes, recrimination, malice. It's like, that's what we just do that. It's like, well, if we don't agree or someone treats us in a way we think is disrespectful, then we say bad things about that person. Try to get someone to get affirm, our point of view, so we feel better. And false speech. These unwholesome states cease without remainder. This is what the fortunate one said. Having said this, the sublime one rose from his seat and went into his dwelling. So I find this interesting. This happens a number of times in the Majjhima Nikayas. He just gets up and leaves after he makes a brief statement. And when I was first reading them, I said, oh, that's fine, that's okay. But when I started reading historians and scholars' like interpretation of this, he probably was tired. He didn't feel like giving an extended Dharma talk on this evening or whatever. Or he felt like maybe this audience isn't really going to pay attention to what I'm going to say. So, I'm not going to, this might be putting it a little grossly, but, I'm not going to waste my time on this. That might not be what he was thinking, but that might be what I would be thinking, if I thought, well, the people aren't really ready to hear this. Or some of the scholars say he had a backache, especially if he's leaning up against a tree, they'll say, oh, he had a backache that day, something like that. So it just brings the human life of the Buddha closer to us. So then, after the Buddha gave this short little discourse, the bhikkhus considered, friends, Fortunate One has risen from his seat and gone into his dwelling after giving a summary and brief without expanding the detailed meaning. The Venerable Mahakashana is praised by the teacher and esteemed by his wise companions. He is capable of expounding the detailed meaning. Suppose we went to him and asked him the meaning of this. And I knew this happened in other suttas in the Majjhima Nikayas, but I just found out last evening when I was reading the footnotes, it only happens 2 other times, this kind of exact thing. And one of them was just another time that I talked a couple weeks ago on a sutta at Dharma Field, and the same kind of exchange happened. So the bhikkhus went to Mahakashana. He's the one known for expanding the teachings of the Buddha in detail when the Buddha speaks in brief. That's his like specialty. The other disciples have other specialties, but this is Mahakashana's specialty. So they went to him and asked, and they told the story, and let the Venerable Mahakashana expound it to us. And then, the same as the other 2 suttas, these monks get a very severe scolding from Mahakashana. And they say, friends, it is though a person was needing heartwood, seeking heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood, thought that heartwood should be sought for among the branches and leaf of a great tree standing possessed of heartwood, after the person had passed over the root and the trunk. And so it is with you, sirs, that you think I should be asked about the meaning of this after you passed the fortunate one by when you were face to face with the teacher. So I'm fond of this because I don't know if you've ever had this experience. I kind of hope you have. But I have had this experience numerous times in my life when I've been in the presence of a great teacher, but I didn't realize it. And I just sort of passed it by. Let me tell you the most poignant example. I was in Calcutta in about 1981, and I volunteered to serve at Mother Teresa's mission for a couple of weeks. And I don't know why I did this, but I went to the mission on Christmas Day. And I don't know, I was in India, so who knows if I got whatever happening, but I went to her main headquarters on Christmas Day, and I said I'd like to volunteer for a couple of weeks because I was a nursing assistant, and I thought, I'll just help out for a couple of weeks. And there was a nun, a sister, who greeted me, and she said, "Oh, that would be so wonderful. Would you like to speak with Mother?" And I went, no, I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay. But I had the opportunity right there to meet Mother Teresa on Christmas Day. And I declined. Just because I couldn't actually realize or see the circumstances, because I was wound up in my own egotistical world. Now, I doubt that the encounter would have been long or extensive, but, it would have been a personal meeting. That's happened on numerous other occasions. So the monk said, "Surely, friend Kashana, we know we messed up." I'm paraphrasing. And we should have done that. And we should have gone to him, and we should have remembered, what he said. However, will you please still do it and give us the detailed meeting? And can you do it without finding it troublesome? So, I can so much appreciate this language. Then Mahakashana agrees. He says, okay, friends, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. And the bhikkhu said, oh, yes. Okay. And then he says, this is what I understand, the detailed meaning of what the Buddha said in brief. Dependent on I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meaning of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. What one feels, that one perceives. What one perceives, that one thinks about. What one thinks about, that one mentally proliferates. With one has mentally proliferated as the source. Perceptions and notions tinged by mental proliferation beset a person, with respect to past, future, and present. Forms cognizable through the eye. And then he goes through the other 6 senses just as well, or 5 senses in Buddhism. I really appreciate this clause or this phrase, mental proliferation. It's something we can mentally proliferate about. I mean, really, we could really start examining what is mental proliferation. Such a nice, that's why I say I just love the language here. It's so exact, and we can see it happening in ourselves. I'll read okay. A couple more things here. So he says then, when there is I, a form, and I consciousness, it is possible to point out the manifestation of contact. When there is the manifestation of contact, it's possible to point out the manifestation of feeling. When there's the manifestation of feeling, it is possible to point out the manifestation of perception. When there is manifestation of perception, it is possible to point out the manifestation of thinking. When there is manifestation of thinking, it is possible to point out the manifestation of being beset by perceptions and notion tinged by mental proliferation. Okay. Maybe some of you could have come up with that same language. And then I'm going to read one more paragraph and then pretty much conclude. When there is no I, no form, and no I consciousness, now this is pretty much just like our Heart Sutra, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of contact. And then he goes through that same list that I just went through, but in the negative. Then I'm going to go down to just the last sentence. When there is no manifestation of thinking, it is impossible to point out the manifestation of being beset by perceptions and notion tinged by mental proliferation. So when there's no manifestation of thinking, now haven't we heard that so many times in Zen Buddhism? How do you do this Zen practice? I practice not thinking. How do you practice not thinking, non-thinking? Okay, then so the bhikkhus were delighted in what Mahakashana had said. They rose from their seats, and after paying homage to them, they went to the fortunate one and said, "This is what Mahakashana said. What do you think?" And the Buddha said, "This is exactly what I would have said." So that's that. And then after that was all over, the Venerable Ananda said to the fortunate one, said, "Venerable Sir, just as a person exhausted by hunger and weakness came upon a honey ball, in the course of eating it, the person would find a sweet, delectable flavor. So too, Venerable Sir, any able-minded bhikkhu in the course of scrutinizing with wisdom the meaning of this discourse on the Dharma would find satisfaction and confidence of mind. Venerable Sir, what is the name of this discourse on the Dharma?" As to that, Ananda, you may remember this discourse on the Dharma as the honey ball discourse. Okay, that's all I have to say for today. And it's 10:08. So I'd be welcome to entertain any kind of questions, comments, and I always add rebuttal to what you might have to offer today. And if there's nothing, that's perfectly fine.
Hello, Dokai.
Hello.
It's Keika here. I don't know if you can see me on the screen.
Yeah, you're off screen.
Hello, how are you? Let's see, I'm here.
Why don't you get on off to the side there?
I just wanted to let you know the lighting makes it look like you're an angel on a cloud.
Well, isn't that the truth? I choreographed that. I worked on it.
Yes, it's perfect. Thanks to the Zoom master for that.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for that. Maybe here, let's try this.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's still good. My question is about the craving of being and non-being.
Yeah.
We're in a society that establishes the individual as the whole thing. We're very not a communal or community-oriented society, in my opinion. So is the craving for being and non-being like a personal problem and we should just solve it on the cushion? Or is there some other way to look at that?
Well, there's many ways to look at it, Keika. There's certainly the personal aspect, and yet we can't just keep it personal, because we need to extend it beyond our personal world. But it will start with our personal life. Granted, there is, we might perceive that we have so much chaos and hatred in this world that it's never been like this, but I'm not sure about that. That might be our perception, our individual perception. It might have been like this for a long, long time. Even in Buddha's time, people were killing each other. It wasn't uncommon. People didn't have, there was no social justice kind of programs. So the way I think we can move forward as a society is that we still need to really work on our personal development. Because if we're working for social justice and social, let's just say, community and harmony, we're going to meet a lot of resistance along the way, because you're right, there's so much individuality, people just looking out for the individual selves, that, and some of these people are very, very smart. They're very, very smart people. And so we're going to need to meet that without anger, without frustration. Because if we meet it with anger and frustration, we're not going to make a difference. The people are only going to see the anger and frustration that we're experiencing. And then they'll say, well, you don't have anything to offer. But if we can meet each, I mean, this is kind of why I like these Nikayas, because the Buddha is meeting that. He's kind of said this right in his first thing to this person. I guess the footnote, I didn't add this. He said that I don't quarrel with anyone, but the world quarrels with me. But how can we be in that place and not be disturbed by the world quarreling with me and still moving forward unrelentlessly? So it's just not personal. It goes far beyond the personal. Is that okay for an answer?
Right. That was a yes.
With a thank you.
Oh, okay. I think I saw a bow or something. Still you're off camera.
Maybe Jushin, we should go back to gallery so that it's a little easier for Dokai to see.
That's up to the individual Zoom people. I actually have you on gallery. You have to set your own to gallery.
Yeah, I have a gallery. So,
but it is actually hard to see people in
behind
the
the
Zendo.
screen and helping us out there.
well, I can't see people. If people in the Zendo are gonna raise. You need to do something more dramatic, like
Come up to the
stand up and whatever, because I can't see so well the individual people in the Zendo.
I think one of the great things about all the Pali Canon, the Nikayas, the suttas, is just how human everybody was, because he was taking a walk for exercise. Like, you don't imagine people 2,000 years ago like taking exercise. That's something somebody might have done in the 30s, right, on advice of their doctor. There's even another one in the Pali Canon where King Pasenadi is he's talking to the Buddha, and he's basically complaining that he's gotten overweight, and the Buddha says, maybe you should eat a little less. And it said he limited his rice consumption to 1 fistful a day, and he got very svelte. So there's an aphorism that we have basically, futuristic technology, medieval institutions, and we're running on Neanderthal software. And so Buddhism, I think, in a lot of ways is a patch to that Neanderthal software.
There's one member in our community, I'm not going to say the name, but he told me once he went to Katagiri Roshi and said, Katagiri, I just can't control my weight. Katagiri just said, eat less. so that was it. But anything else? Yeah, Mary. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. No, this is, there's so much power in power in this sense. It's like, yeah, I get this. This is really down, earthy, gritty. This message is like, oh, I get this in my own life. was the Buddha enlightened by this all the time? By these teachings himself? I mean, it's hard for me to even imagine how difficult, this is. I understand you have to start where you are. You have to, your energy is just what your energy is at the time. I mean, I'm asking you as as a Buddhist scholar in your own right, was he was teaching, I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm just asking. I want you to, does that make sense?
No. I just, can you just say your question?
He was practicing, so he was teaching what he was practicing.
He was teaching what he was practicing. Yes, okay, yes.
Was he able to realize what he was practicing, like all the time?
Oh, okay. I think now
does that make sense?
That makes sense. That makes sense. And of course, I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't know him personally. And yet all I can do is say something based on my own practice. It's the only thing I can say that's authentic, because I don't know anyone else's practice, only my own. And I would say he didn't always have good days. I mean, I don't always have good days. And I'm not saying I am a fully awakened Buddha or anything like that, but I am saying I've done this practice for quite a while, and we just have to do the best we can. That's what it comes down to. We can ask questions such as what you're asking, Mary, and I can ask them too. Was he always like spot on every moment? Because if he was, I've got a long, long ways to go to match that. However, asking that question itself isn't really so helpful. I mean, maybe it's inspirational to a certain degree, because maybe it's going to inspire me. Oh, okay, I got to work harder. But on the other hand, it's just like, okay, we got this life in front of us. This is all we have. And whether, someone else did it a lot better than we can do in the past, even though we read these things, it doesn't matter. We have to do it ourselves right now the best we can. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but that's the way I have to deal with it myself.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
know it was a non-answer, but
no, that was wonderful.
Way, but a lot of times the Buddha really doesn't answer things. He just not specifically. He just asks you, don't speculate about things, because that doesn't really help so much. He constantly does that. Okay, it looks like Jushin, you have your hand up.
No, I just had a comment about Mary's question and your answer, and I'm going to be a little more adventurous and say he probably absolutely did not. And my guess is from this is just being a teacher in general, that there's a certain pedagogy that you only teach people the right way to do things. And we very rarely show people what mistakes look like. And so, I have course notes. I have sort of a textbook for, what I teach. And it dawned on me a while ago that I don't have any negative examples in it. Like I don't have, this is what to do if things go wrong. I only say, this is the right way to do everything. But I don't say, well, if you failed to do the right thing, this is how you get out of it. And so, yeah, I would guess we probably have both for pedagogical reasons, we have only the positive things. And then also I imagine over time we get sort of a highlights reel effect.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it could have been he was just like a person that was so unusual in the world at that time. But I mean, the literature afterwards, but you have to realize things weren't written down till 300 years after he died. And of course he becomes a god, almost, really. But that, to me, that's because people there's a certain, I mean, I'm not, okay, I'll say this, but obviously that's what happened with Jesus. He became a god. And it's my perception is like some primal part of ourselves as human beings, there's something in there that needs to believe there's a god, a person can be a god. And I actually feel like I don't need that. But it's taken me, but I think that a lot of people actually feel that they have to believe in something supernatural beyond, a human being just can't do it. They gotta, it's gotta be a transcendent, godlike thing. But I'm still working to make that not my belief. So it's basically, one of my other favorite sayings, things that the Buddha said is about, someone asked him about an afterlife. And he just said, well, I don't know. I don't know if there's an afterlife. No one knows, because no one knows. I mean, after they die, they don't know what, you can't say what happens. But he said, it doesn't make any difference. If there is an afterlife, then you have to do exactly the same thing you have to do if there isn't an afterlife to create your peace and happiness in this world. So whether it is or isn't, it doesn't make any difference. You still just have to live in this moment, be kind and generous. That's it. The same practice. Yeah, Carl, Hartman.
Well, I've been eavesdropping as Susan, and I've got.
I was wondering who that was.
And I didn't have any camera or microphone on when I was logged in over there, and now I'm getting my own voice coming from the TV. What I wanted to say was that the genius of the Buddha, to me, that was pointed out by some teachers that I've listened to, was not that he was perfectly enlightened. We have no idea. He was enlightened. He had deep, meaningful insights into the existential situation of human beings. He may or may not have been the first to have these realizations, but he was the first one that was capable of teaching to the people these realizations that he had. And he was a good enough teacher that he drew hundreds, if not thousands of people, into his following, and that he could put this together in a teaching that's lasted for over 2 millennia. That was really the genius of the Buddha that I deeply appreciate. But you also picked the longest and most complicated sutra in the Pali Canon.
It's not the longest.
Well, it is,
Maybe
because they repeat all of those things. If you look at the unabridged one, every sense gets run through 3 different times or something like that, that they just have a repetition. Anyway, nice talk, Dokai. You look like you're feeling a little better. So
I'm feeling better. I'm feeling
all right.
better.
Well, good.
I don't think it's the longest one, but it was, it's meaty. It's meaty.
Well, Pico Bodhi said it's the most complicated. So
he did. Oh, I didn't read that anywhere.
Go to Access. He's got a long introduction at Access to Insight on the Sutra.
Oh, okay. I haven't read that. Okay.
Anyway, nice talk.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, yeah. How are we on time? I can't see the time on my computer. Well,
we have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. Well, then, if there's like a 30-second question and a 1.5-minute answer, we can do that, or we can.
Hi, Dokai. This is Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Nice to hear you, and I'm sorry that we weren't able to touch personally this work weekend. But my question is, when you went to work for Mother Teresa, what did you do? And in fact, did you feel the presence of the, so to speak, Holy One, even though you didn't actually meet her personally?
What I did is I washed bodies and cleaned shit. So I'm not sure I felt the holy presence.
Okay.
And it was, and not only that, when I would wash these, it was all men, of course, that had men separated. When I'd wash these guys, they would complain. Say, no, more water here, no, send me over here. Okay. But the one thing I did experience is that one of the directors, or the director of the particular place where I was working, said he used to be a street person, and he would beg for money. And he admonished me, don't give money to the people who beg you on the streets. He says, it's not helpful. For one thing, there might be a gigantic scheme connected with it. And so what I felt was, because when you are in India, people are going to ask you for what do they call it? Bakshish, like a little, give me a gift, something like that. It's going to happen continuously all day long. So I felt like, well, volunteering in this mission, I was giving something quite valuable. And so I didn't really feel the need that I had to give money to people. And I also developed a kind of a confidence that I didn't have to look away from the person. I didn't have to get angry at the person. It was just, I could just look at them and smile and say, no. I could just look directly into their face and say, no. And then I got kind of overconfident. And then one day I was leaving the mission, or the place where I was doing my work, and I rounded a corner, and there was this man who was limbless on a little board like a mechanic uses to go under the car. You know what I mean? Like a 4-foot board or something with wheels on it. And he would propel himself with a stick in his mouth. And he looked at me, asking for something. And then I said, no, I don't have this down. It's like, man, I was delusional thinking I have this situation under control, because it was quite shocking. So how's that, Dan, for an answer?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think we should probably close now, Jushin.
All right. Thank you, Dokai, for your talk. Just a couple matters of housekeeping. Thank you again, everyone who came for Caring for the Land. And I believe it's November 18th. We will have a work weekend if you did not get enough or you have friends who didn't come and want to come. December 3rd will be Rohatsu Session of it. And of course, if you're planning way far in advance, we'll have winter practice periods starting at the end of January. And next week, we will hear from Reverend Kyoku Tracy Whalen, who is in your midst. She'll be giving a Dharma talk. And we have Dharma talks every Sunday if you want to tune in. We also have morning Zazen online Wednesday through Saturday. And so you can always be connected to Hokyoji. And yeah, let's close with the 4 vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. I always hate doing that alone without a script because I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.